So this workshop will not be an outline with prescriptions for your practice, saying, wake up at this time, do these moves, say this chant, and then you have the perfect practice, right? This is much more like, it's like a coaching experience where the richer you will, the content will become more rich for you as you reflect on your own practice for what's real for you in your life. So there will be lots of times when I offer questions that are pretty open-ended, and that's a chance for you to either reflect in writing or pause and think about what's real for you in your life. And I have a Facebook group called Afton Muir Yoga, and I'll be sending you a follow-up email, including a bunch of resources that I name. And if you feel inspired after the workshop is done to hop onto the group and introduce yourself, you could share there some of the replies and responses that you've come up with from the content of the workshop, things that work for you, ideas that you had, things that you're going to try, valuable takeaways. Because one of the most important parts of making any new habit stick is creating community to support that habit. So there's science to back up this idea that the single most influential indicator about the success of a new habit is whether you have community to support you in that habit. So whether it's trying to eat healthier, exercise more, whatever it might be, if you have one person who is in alignment with you, who you can talk to, who can support you, that's the single strongest influence as to whether or not that habit will stick. So being in community together right now in this way is huge, especially in the isolation that we've all been experiencing over the last year. And so having a community online or an accountability buddy that you might text or call each day is going to be really helpful in helping this take root in your life. So that's a little bit of the housekeeping. I'm Afton. It's wonderful to see so many new faces and faces that I know and love. I am a life coach for women, a mindfulness based life coach, and I'm a yoga instructor. I'm a 500-hour RYT 500 certification level yoga instructor here in Corvallis. Let's see, this workshop was inspired by my friend Holly. So I'm going to call you out. Holly's here in the workshop as well. And so Holly, thank you for being my inspiration for the class, because Holly used to, a year ago, practice daily, and she would drop her kids off at school and childcare, and she would come to class with me or class with other teachers. And so she had a daily practice in a studio space for an hour before the workday began. And then when lockdown started, like so many of us, all of that went out the window. Her childcare, school, studios, gyms, everything was gone. And so she went from a person who had a really rich hour-long daily practice to someone who wasn't doing yoga every day anymore. And what Holly said to me was so impactful, because she said, I am a yogi. Like, it matters to me that I practice every day. So what Holly did was she put her mat next to her bed on the carpet in her bedroom. So when she'd wake up and leave the bed, she'd do, hands and knees on the floor and do a couple of cat and cow, a little stretch side to side, like a gentle twist. And then she'd just give herself some loving breaths to say, I'm alive, and then start her day. Same thing coming to bed at night. In order to get into bed, she had to step on her yoga mat, and she would lay down on the floor and, bring her knees up to her chest and rock around and maybe do a bridge pose and take a few loving breaths and then climb into bed. It was literally like 2 minutes in the morning, 2 minutes in the evening. And she said to me, I'm a person who does yoga twice a day, right? And that I loved so much, because I struggled as well with shifting expectations of what successful yoga or what being a yogi means. So a little bit about me. I attended the Evergreen State College, and the first 2 years of school I spent in an immersion yoga program. So I have college credit in things like consciousness studies and somatics and yoga nidra and East Asian philosophy. And at that point, I started in the Vipassana meditation tradition, which is a pretty rigorous, structured silent meditation form. And then I became a parent. I had a child, and everything about the way I had practiced before did not fit into my life at all. And I struggled comparing myself with peers from that time who, could go live in an ashram in India and do month-long retreats and workshops and teacher trainings. And so I had this unconscious belief that I can't be a real yogi because I am a mother. And another belief under that was that I can't, that if I did yoga the right way, if I'm a real yogi, then I would somehow arrive in happiness or wholeness, or that I could, achieve or prove my worthiness or my goodness to some, imaginary authority figure out there. So that took some layering. Like the first layer was, I'm logistically, I have a baby and no childcare. When will I practice? Under that is, I can't be a real yogi because I'm a mother. And under that was this idea of what real yoga even meant and what my need for practicing was. So that's a little bit about my background. And we all have challenges, right? We all have obstacles. And I loved reading all of the obstacles and challenges that you sent. So if you sent me some of your struggles, thank you. Because I was reading through, I was like, oh, honey, I've been there. I know that one. This is true for me too. This is so hard. And so recognizing how that bit of community and seeing how we're not alone, like you're not alone in the difficulty of trying to craft a practice that is time for you to be in your body, to connect with something larger than yourself. When we have all of this householder life spinning around us, right? Like right behind me, I have a huge load of laundry that's on the couch. There's dirty dishes in the sink over here. Thankfully it's Sunday, so my husband took the kids to go play soccer and it's dry, thank goodness. But we have so much that's in the way. And so I'm going to summarize some of the things that people responded to as their challenges. There were so many that were overlapping and interconnected. And I'll just name some of the basic ones. I don't have time. This assumption that a practice needs to be a certain length in order to be a practice, to be valid. This was a really common one that I don't know where to start. I can't do the poses demonstrated in the videos. I can't keep up. I end up feeling inadequate, or I feel uncomfortable in my body because what's being offered through the video isn't actually suitable to my energy or my mobility in this moment. I'm injured, right? My wrists hurt, my shoulder hurts, my back hurts. So how do I move? I'm not, those kinds of limitations of what correct or beneficial movement might be. A really big one is this idea of mother load, right? The mother overwhelm of life. So how do I carve out time just for myself? I don't have childcare. The kids are in the house. They're going to be on the mat. They're climbing on my back. They're knocking me over. They're making noise. And those are some of the biggest reasons that we need to practice, right? Is to settle our nervous system and nourish ourselves so we can show up in the world with our families in a resourced way. And yet they themselves are sometimes the hurdle between what can make practice possible. Having a space that feels calm, a space that feels like it's my own, that's a really big one. We've been isolated. Having a studio to go to made it in some ways sacred, this separate space, and trying to create a similar feeling of like, I have my own autonomous zone. I have privacy to drop into my body is really a challenge for a lot of us. So we'll address some of those concepts and come up with a few strategies to work around that. These last ones were big, that convincing myself that self-care is just as important as any of the other things I might be doing. So we have this sense of busyness, like, oh, if I need to be productive. It's selfish to take time for myself. If I'm just lying on the floor, I'm wasting time when I could be folding that laundry or loading those dishes or responding to an email. So this sense of doing as more valuable than creating space to be, Even if it's 10 minutes a day, we still resist and feel conflicted about carving that out for ourselves sometimes. So I want to pause for a second and just recognize that's universal. Like, we all struggle with those things in our own way. So you might have your unique story and your unique circumstances, but it's valid. And those are hard hurdles to overcome in the process of making a practice. And they're hurdles that we face all the time. Anybody who wants to start a practice or sustain a practice is going to struggle with some of these things. And it's been just quadruply hard in our current pandemic lifestyle of being quarantined and being isolated and being homebound. So you're not alone, and I'm really happy that you're here. And I'm proud of you for the efforts to make space in your life for yourself and for a practice that feels authentic, that feels nourishing. Jumping back to the hurdles, like my hurdles eventually did shift in layers over time. So eventually I figured out ways to carve time for myself. Eventually I figured out that yes, I can pay for a babysitter so that I can lay on the floor and do really gentle yoga for an hour. And that matters and it's valid. A big shift I had in my mindset was at a meditation. I attend regularly brief meditations, so like a day or an afternoon. And at one point I divulged to the leader of the meditation teacher how much I was struggling with feeling like I wasn't a real meditator. I couldn't make progress because in that tradition, students are encouraged to meditate for an hour every morning and every evening. I was like, I got 3 babies and no childcare. Like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. There is no way I'm going to be able to do that. And the meditation teacher herself said, oh, my child comes and pretends to be a cat, and she lays on my lap and we meow at each other and I pet her fur during my meditation. I was like, oh, right. Like, comparing what's real with this imaginary ideal does nothing but create resistance and resentment. So accepting that life is what it is, and it still matters, and it still helps, and it still benefits. Even if I'm meditating lying down in bed with my children while they're falling asleep at the end of the day, that's my evening meditation. If I'm washing the dishes because the dishwasher broke, that's my mid-morning mindfulness break, right? My kids come out and sit on my lap when I'm meditating and I'm sipping my decaf coffee. Like, that's integrated with my practice. They're part of the practice. So recognizing that, like, it's not a problem to be solved. It's something to be work around. It's a workaround. It's something that we work into our lives. And to shift around the idea that yoga has to be an hour of poses with some meditation or some chanting, and the poses are warrior 2 and downward facing dog, and I'm wearing my yoga pants and I have some incense burning in the house, right? That's lovely. That's beautiful. I enjoy that when I have the chance to do that. That is not what my practice looks like. And to recognize that yoga as a philosophy is a philosophy. It is 8 limbs, like 8 spokes of a wheel. And body postures, which asana translates into a comfortable seat. And traditionally, that comfortable seat was to prepare for meditation, to prepare for absorption into spirit. And the other spokes of this wheel, the other limbs, include the yamas and the niyamas, the breath work. And so the yamas and the niyamas are really important. They are the ethical underpinnings of a yoga practice. They're guidelines for how we relate to ourselves and how we relate to each other. The yamas and the niyamas are a whole nother workshop, which I would love to go in. It's like a workshop with 10 classes in it, right? So I'd love to do that another time. But to summarize quickly, in English, they're non-harming, honesty, non-stealing, right use of sexual energy, and non-attachment. And the niyamas are purity, contentment, self-discipline, self-study, and contemplation of the true self or unchanging reality. So just as valid as a practice that includes downward facing dog on a mat would be committing to practicing contentment or gratitude practice for 10 minutes every day with sincere attention, right? That's a rich, lifelong, deep, meaningful way of practicing yoga. So the idea of the 8 limbs of yoga being the spokes of the wheel is that we invest in all of those in turn and simultaneously sometimes. So I'm going to pause and take a nice breath for myself. And we're going to step from that phase into the philosophy, the psychology and the science of habit formation. So I knew that's a lot of what many people came and are interested in. It's like, how can I make this habit stick? How can I choose to do something new or improve or change something that I'm already doing and expand upon it or deepen it? So this information is really well presented by the author Wendy Wood. She wrote the book Good Habits, Bad Habits. And she was featured on NPR's podcast Hidden Brain recently. There was an episode called Creature of Habit, I think in late December, which was really good. And so she was a guest speaker on that, which I will link into the follow-up email. The psychology of habit formation and the brain science of habit formation teach us that your brain evolved to seek pleasure and avoid pain in order to survive. So the evolutionary development of your brain, your limbic brain, your very primitive brain is deep down in the back of the brain. And then your most recently evolved brain areas are the prefrontal cortex in the front. And this is what allows us imagination, pre-planning. This is where we have the capacity to empathize and feel compassion for another person and plan in advance. This part of the brain takes enormous energy. So making decisions based, like judging the information, making informed choices in the moment uses like a lot of caloric energy. It's harder for the brain to do. It takes a longer amount of time. I mean, we're talking microseconds, but these decisions, these like life and death quick decisions happen really fast. So the reflexive action requires less energy. So what your brain does is it takes information based on your environment and your life experiences, and it says, okay, here is pleasure. I am going to avoid pain, and I'm going to do it in the most efficient way possible. And so once we find a groove that works, it gets delegated back to this more unconscious thinking space so that you don't have to think about it. So that works in beneficial ways, like I can drive a car, I can walk, and I don't have to think about it. But it makes it harder to consciously make choices that are in opposition to a habit that's already in place because it takes so much caloric energy for the brain. What we're going to talk about next is something called the habit loop. So this is a cognitive loop, a neurological loop in the brain that consists of 3 parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. So your cue is anything that triggers. It's your stimulus. It could be the time of day. It could be seeing something. The routine is what happens next. It's how you respond. It can be your behavior, your actions, your thoughts about a circumstance. And the reward is the result of that behavior. The result could be a feeling. The result can be tangible or intangible, depending on the circumstance and the situation. But every habit has those 3 parts in it. So some examples, I might not need to elaborate on this one, but the morning coffee routine, right? Like, what's my cue? It's dawn. That's my cue. Like, it's the first thing you think of doing when you get out of bed. I walk down the hall and then I go make my coffee. And so then the routine is I open the cupboard, I get out the pot, I fill the water, I do the filter. The reward from that, I have a biological addiction to the coffee, although I've switched to decaf a year ago, which is great. So I have a little less of the biological attachment to it, but the tactile, the smell, the warmth, the taste, right? Like the ritual of the coffee. And then I walk from the kitchen to the sunny window and I sit there, right? There's so many pieces that fit together into that habit. You might find that really easy to get in your own life too. Another more subtle example of the cue, routine, reward cycle at work is procrastination, for example. So the cue for procrastination is that you have some homework to do, or bills to pay, or taxes to fill out, right? That's the cue, is sitting at your desk or seeing that come up on your calendar. Oh, that I need to file the taxes. I need to make time to file the taxes. The inner cue, however, the physical cue that comes up is overwhelm or fear of failure or dread, perhaps. And so that's a more visceral cue, that like pull in the gut that's associated to a story. The routine, then, the way you respond to that cue, whether it's the paperwork on the desk or the feeling in your body, the routine would be to create comfort, to relieve that stress, to relieve the discomfort by doing it later, or saying, I'm just going to set this aside and do it tomorrow, right? To defer or delay. And that makes sense. So it's the brain's quick response to avoiding pain and seeking pleasure in the most efficient way possible. The long-term reward, though, the long-term result is something we don't want. But in a habit loop, the reward that is most impactful is immediate and tangible. So you might have the immediate reward that's kind of small and the long-term reward that's really big by taking a different course of action. But the immediate reward that's small is going to be easier and a lot more appealing to that limbic brain. Another word in the psychology of habit formation that's really common is this idea of friction. So friction describes the hurdles that make our routine harder to act on. So for example, let's say I want to paint. I've told myself I'm going to paint for 20 minutes every day because I love art. It's important to me. It's cathartic. It matters that I take time to make art for myself because I am an artist, right? But if I have to pull 4 boxes out from under my bed to reach the paint box, and then I have to clear off the desk from the kids' paperwork and find the easel in the hall closet and set it up on the desk, and then go look for the brushes, which the kids were using outside in the backyard and they still have paint on them, so I have to clean them, right? I'm not going to paint very often because it took me 25 minutes to just get to that point. Whereas the idea of friction works in the other direction too. So imagine that if I keep the desk clear and it's in the corner of my room and the paint box is always out and the easel's set up and the paper is pinned to the corners, right? And the brushes are clean. If I find 20 minutes in my day, I can just walk in and paint for 20 minutes. So I've removed the friction. I've made it frictionless. So that habit is so much more likely to be successful because I've changed the hurdles and the obstacles along the way. So this is a journal prompt that you can return to after the workshop or take down some notes and identify, like, what is your cue, routine, reward cycle when it comes to yoga and mindfulness practice? Where is there discomfort? Where is your reward? What is your routine? And consider that, like maybe dig into it a little bit more and recognize what's working and areas that you might want to tweak and shift. Another important thing is to identify, where do you have unnecessary friction in your routine? Like, where are there hurdles that are getting in the way of you being able to say yes to even 10 or 15 minutes once a day to your practice for yourself? And so those friction hurdles are going to be unique to every person and every circumstance, but we all have them. And some of them are easier to shift than others, but we'll be sharing some brainstorming options later in the workshop to address those in specifics. One more thing I want to talk about with obstacles my friend Joseph, who is very wise and has had a lifelong, rich yoga and meditation practice, shared his observation with me. And he said, it seems to me that one obstacle arises because teaching often starts within a set tradition or a school of study, and then it imposes that set of structures on the students and expects the students to conform to that structure. And he said, I never had a teacher ask me to start from where I am and then build a practice based on my reality. And Joseph was remembering a time when he was teaching earlier in his career, reading in Yoga Journal, which is a magazine oriented towards yoga teachers and yoga students. And it was an article written by a dwarf who wrote about his experience, about being unable to fit into the model that was presented to him. And he had to rewrite what yoga was for his reality. And Joseph said that was like light bulbs went off for him about it really shifted his practice for himself, that he needed to find out what worked for him. The last thing he said is, there's nobody who's going to condemn you to purgatory for doing it wrong either. Like, we have this sense of being judged. And he reminded me that Lila is this spontaneously arriving divine play. And that Lila is fundamental in a personal yoga practice. So it's this creative energy that urges us forward into the fruition of form. And that this body practice, it's an inquiry, right? It's not a manufacturing facility. We're not going to achieve some, award for our performance of our spiritual practice for somebody else. It's more an opportunity to be fully human and feel that Lila, that spontaneously arising creative energy at work in your body, in your breath, in your mind, and savor that and really honor that as important on this life path. One that was really big for me that I want to share is a book called Waking by Matthew Sanford. And again, I'll link this in the follow-up email. The book will make you weep. Matthew was in a tragic and horrific car accident as a young teen, I think 12 or 13 or 14, and he was paralyzed from the chest down. And as an adult, he was introduced to yoga practice and started a yoga practice. I'm going to summarize dramatically, but over time, through yoga, he started to feel his body. Now, his spinal cord was severed. The doctors assured him, you're making this up. There is no nerve communication between your legs and your brain. You will never walk again. And that's true. He couldn't feel sensation-wise his legs anymore or ever again. But what happened for him, what shifted for him, was through his yoga practice, he felt, rather than fully severed from his body, as if he were just a chest and a brain, with this absence dangling beneath him, his legs were still alive. His blood flowed to his cells, right? His nerve endings were receiving information, even though there was a break in the highway in the middle of his back, the nerves were alive. His toenails grew, his hair grew, his muscle fibers were receiving oxygen. What he felt was the prana of his own life energy in his whole body. So his yoga practice was not about taking a shape. It was about feeling the aliveness of his living being as whole. And that brings us back to this big question, why do we practice? Why? That's the big one. Why do we practice? What's calling you to a spiritual practice, a mindfulness practice, an embodiment practice? Why is a body-based practice important to you? And that's going to be unique for each of us. And a suggestion might be, write that down, contemplate that for a while, write it down and put it somewhere that you'll remember, on the back of your phone, on the coffee pot, on the bathroom mirror, near your altar, on your dresser. The big why is going to be the thing that urges you forward. And for me, realizing that the why of practicing at a different chapter of life was to prove my worthiness to some outside judge. It's like, once I saw that, I could let it go. And now my why is really different. And my practice is not based on a should or an obligation. It's because I love my practice. It's for me. And it's precious to me. So find your why. What are your goals? What are your needs? And keep that close to your heart, and keep that in a place where you can be easily reminded of it as you move through your day and as you're developing this new idea of what you want your practice to be. I want to talk next about, so that's the big one, the why. Next domain of practice is mindset. So Holly's example of her mindset is, I'm a yogi and it's important to me that I practice every day, right? That was her mindset. And it was successful because she shifted the where and the how, but the why and the who stayed the same. And that was what was important for her. And so reflect, maybe, do you have a mindset? Do you have a sentence in your mind that summarizes what it is that you do when you practice yoga, or who you are as a person that practices yoga? And when you're investigating what your mindset really is, I have some suggestions. You can try these on. They're phrases you might experiment with to see if it gives you a shift one way or another. So you could consider the mindset as, I am giving myself a gift. I am giving Afton of tomorrow the gift of well-being today. I'm giving the Afton of tomorrow a body that feels alive. I am giving Afton of tomorrow some tools for regulating the nervous system so that I can be present with my family, so that I can live in alignment with my values. I'm taking care of Afton. Or just like I brush my teeth and I wash my hair, I clean my inner self and I floss my brain, right? That could be another attitude for what it is when we're doing yoga or mindfulness practice. Like, I take care of myself. And I love taking care of myself. So those are some possibilities that you could try on. And the qualitative suggestions about when you're looking through your own mindset, and maybe some limiting mindsets or some mindsets that you want to move toward, notice what messages you're feeling in your body. So if there's resistance coming up, if you're like, that feels hokey to me, or I feel this like pulling away or this resistance when I try on that mindset, that's valuable information. There's nothing wrong happening when that's your experience. That's body wisdom. And it matters to slow down and listen to what's being communicated. And so you might ask yourself, where in my body am I feeling a sensation of resistance? I'm like, thank you for communicating something of me. Like, what do you have to say? So to ask yourself those questions, like, it's almost like if a friend came to you and said, oh, I'm just a piece of crap and I just hate myself because I can't seem to follow through. It's like, oh, sweetheart, like, you must be really hurting to say that about yourself. So if you can adopt that quality toward your own reality, like, oh, sweetheart, like, what wounded part of you has something to share? And that's yoga. That's turning toward yourself with compassion. That's self-study. And it matters. So take the time to poke around and investigate into your own narratives and beliefs there. Start with achievable expectations, right? Like I keep using Holly's example. Making it achievable is going to allow you the sense of confidence building over time. I want to mention one more thing, and this is pretty vulnerable for me, so thank you for holding it in advance. I think there's a negative and a harmful worldview about this idea that if you just change your thinking, change your mindset, you can change your life. Because your life also lives in your body. Your life experience is alive in your body. And there were years where I couldn't practice. There were a couple of years I didn't practice at all in any form. And I felt ashamed, and I felt like a fraud, and I felt like a hypocrite. And now that I look back and I can see the course of my life in this like ocean of compassion for my own experience, those times when I could not go there were protective. That was my body protecting me. Because if I were to truly dive all the way into what was there for myself, I would have been overwhelmed and shredded and devastated. It wasn't safe for me to truly feel what was present. So some of the numbing and some of the disassociation was out of my body's wise efforts to protect me. And titration is this idea of just slowly adding tiny, tiny drops of the dangerous substance over time to increase your tolerance. And that's what we do in a trauma-sensitive yoga and mindfulness practice operates in the same way. So we're not telling you to leap in and just feel everything. Yoga and mindfulness and being with sensation in your body needs to happen carefully and tenderly, and know that you have agency, and know that if something comes up you're not equipped to deal with or to fully feel, that's okay. It takes the time it takes. It takes the time it takes. And that yoga was part of that return to coming back to life for me too. It was very slow and it was very small over a long period of time, where I built my psychological and emotional resources to be robust enough to hold whatever chaos came up during my practice. And it took a decade. And it's a lifelong journey, right? It's not like I'm fixed, right? I was never broken. It just took time to hold what was there. So befriend your life experience as your truest teacher, because it really is. And this path isn't a straight line, right? But there are no dead ends, and there are no wrong turns. It's just a spiral labyrinth of experience where we deepen and expand on every turn around. So that's mindset. Thank you. I wanted to make sure that I included that. Let's get to schedule. Okay, so I know this is the one that's more practical, like how do I schedule my yoga practice? So when do you currently do yoga? These are some questions. When do you do it? What is working about your time? What's not working about your schedule, and why? And what do you have the agency to change? Like, where is your power? How are you using your time? So some suggestions: put it on your calendar, like with big highlighter around the edges and exclamation marks and things. Put it on your calendar on the wall, put it on the calendar on your phone, put it on your shared family calendar with your housemates and your spouse and your kids, and describe how this matters to you, and you're going to set aside time. And give me 15 minutes. But it matters that you create that sort of commitment to yourself. Set a timer. If feeling like you have to have this long practice is overwhelming and you're less likely to do anything at all, like if I can't practice an hour, I'm just not going to try. Like, set a timer for 5 minutes. 5 minutes is enough. It will be rich. It will be worth it. It can be brief. Identify where there are already gaps in your day where you're filling time. Keeping in mind the arc of energy in the day, right? So you might want to energize during times when you're moving towards engagement or external effort in the world. And you might want to downregulate your nervous system as you're moving more toward the end of the day and the evening. So you can strategize how you're going to use your yoga practice to benefit you. And especially like knowing where this little wasted time moments show up. And what you do during those times. So like if there's this little gap and you're kind of restless, how do you fill that gap? Often for many of us, it's, this like friendly computer that lives in the pocket. And can you shift some of those uses of time in small ways, where before I pick up my phone, I'm going to do 5 rounds of intentional belly breath. So you can have a little sticky note on the back of your phone. This is before you swipe to turn it on. Do 5 rounds of intentional belly breath. And then at the end, you can decide whether the thing you were going to do is really important and needs to be done, or whether you were just restless. This is a good one. Accountability buddy. I'm going to jump back to it again. I mentioned it earlier. This one's really important. So building community, having someone, anyone in the world who can be a support to you in this process. So have someone who you say, I'm going to text you after I do yoga, or I'm going to text you before I do yoga, or I'm going to text you like a little celebration when I did my 5 minutes of my meditation. And you guys can be that for each other. It can be an inspiration. It can be a reminder. It can be a moment of celebration and a shared affirmation that this matters. And it's not just this private little secret thing I'm keeping to myself, but it matters, and I'm going to share it with somebody. And I'm going to be proud of myself, and I'm going to own that this is an important part of who I am. And I'm going to let someone in so they can witness and they can celebrate with me and for me, and I can celebrate for them. And we're making room for yoga practice in our lives. So that's a really big one that I encourage you to do. If you don't already have a person, hop onto my yoga group. I have a yoga Facebook group, Afton Muir Yoga. Let's like connect. We'll do like a little pen pal connection situation where you can even use that space as your accountability buddy. Like hop on and say, hey, I'm going to do my loving kindness meditation for 5 minutes every day. And every time I do it, I'm going to hop on here and I'm going to put a little heart emoji to indicate that I did it, right? And we can outpour that support for you. One more big one for your schedule. I'm going to wink at you, Holly. Who owns your time? Who's responsible for your time? That's a big one. Who owns your time? And a lot of the time we feel like, oh, my children own my time, or my job owns my time. But asking ourselves really radically in this sense of responsibility, like, oh, I own my time. I am responsible for my time and how I use it. Is this invitation back into power rather than blaming the outside and blaming the circumstances and blaming my kids? Like, I don't want to blame my kids. I love my kids. I chose my kids. They're wonderful. I'm responsible for myself. So it's not my kids' fault that I'm not doing yoga. It's my responsibility to make structure in my life to own my own priorities. This leads us nicely into the next kind of umbrella of practice, the umbrella area of your environment. So where in your home, where in your life are you able to practice? And that sense of who owns your time, I think, is really connected to this question of where can I practice? What is my environment? Because many of us live in community. We live with housemates, we live with flatmates, we live with partners or spouses or children. And our environment is both communal and something that I take responsibility for, creating space for me. So you can consider where you practice, where do you already practice, and where would you like to practice versus where might it be easier and more frictionless to practice. So one of the students, one of the participants sent in a little message saying that they have a beautiful sunny front room and imagined during quarantine they would do a lot of yoga in that front room, and they've only been in there like twice to do yoga, but bringing the mat into the corner of the little home office with a couple of candles in the evening, they're able to actually do it much more often there. So for whatever reason, there's less friction for that person to do yoga in that space. So you'll have to consider in your own life, where am I thinking yoga should be, and where might it actually happen more often if I spread out more creatively into what's possible. So let's see. Oh, I have a funny story about a meditation teacher on a podcast I listened to recently, who has a beautiful altar in her living room with the mala beads and flowers and her statue of the Buddha. And a friend came by and said, wow, this is gorgeous. Is this where you meditate? And she said, no, I'm a single mom. Like, there's kids here all the time. Like, I meditate in the bathroom. I get up, I pee, and I sit on the floor next to the toilet and I meditate, because it's the one place I can lock the door, and most of the time, people aren't going to bang on me. But if somebody else has to poop, then I leave and I go get dressed. And I sit in my closet with the door closed and I meditate in my bedroom getting dressed. There's this idea of what we think is going to be best and then what's real. And doing your meditation practice in a messy room in the corner on the floor next to the pile of clothes is better than trying to pick up the clothes and neglecting to meditate at all. So get flexible about what your expectations are and creative about where you might be able to create space. Try to keep it simple. Important things to consider, and these ones are tough, but no TV, no phone. If that's a hard thing to do, put your phone in your dresser drawer and close the door and walk away, right? Or put a sheet over the television so it's not glaring at you. So that's another way to make friction on purpose to deter the habits that you don't want to engage in. Make it harder for yourself to be distracted during the 10 minutes that you've committed to doing a yoga practice. The habit of environment will become stronger the more consistently you do the thing in the same place at the same time. So that's, again, the prefrontal cortex versus the limbic system. If you have to choose every day where and when and what you're going to do, it takes so much more effort. It's a lot easier to be derailed. Whereas if you have, it's already decided, this is where I do it, this is when I do it, this is what I do it, I have the timer, the reminders on my phone, it comes up every day at the same time. You don't have to decide. It's already been decided for you. So you can trust that limbic system to work in your benefit. It's going to help you on that path. Another thing too, like the time of day, the smell, the texture, the things you see sensually will also deepen the grooves of habit. So if time isn't so urgent and you have a little more space, enriching your environment with things like I buy myself flowers. If my garden isn't blooming, I go to the store and I buy myself flowers. Essential oils, self-massage, a blanket that you like the way it feels and you keep it near your meditation cushion. So when you put that on, you have this tactile sensory association with your practice. And so all of those things over time will build the grooves of habit deeper and stronger, where you'll walk into that space. And if it's, 8:15 at night or 7:30 in the morning, whenever your practice is, your body will be cued to say, oh yeah, this is yoga time. This is my yoga space. This is the way it smells when I sit down to do yoga. And own your worth. Own your autonomy. You deserve to take up space. So are you compromising what you truly want to do with your time because of concern for the inconvenience, or it's going to be awkward to do this in front of somebody else, or like, I want to meditate, but my husband's on the couch eating chips, and so like, what am I going to do? I'm responsible for me. I can't control anybody else, but I can keep my promises to myself. And I keep earplugs. This is my earplug. I keep these at hand. They're right by my yoga space. So I'll show you. This is where, it's just the living room floor. I keep my mat rolled up either in the corner or under my couch. I keep my earplugs right at hand. I keep my cushion on the floor. And whatever anybody else is doing in the house, like, I'm still responsible for myself. So of course it's better. I'd love to practice when there's nobody around, but sometimes I'm willing to do it for myself anyway, even when the kids are running up and down the hallway. The environment matters as well, in that I don't practice in the morning most of the time. I practice after I put my kids to bed. So my cue routine response is that I put my kids to sleep, I close the door, I come out and make a hot cup of tea, and then I go sit on my cushion. And I give myself permission to do nothing. It's my time, and whatever I need to do during that time counts. And I like to move. So inevitably, I usually end up doing some dance meditation or some movement or some postures. So I'll roll on the floor. I'll do some pranayama, some intentional breathing, and I'll end in more of a stillness meditation. That's usually my flow. But if I'm exhausted or if I'm about to start my cycle, I might just I'll do my routine, right? I put my kids to bed, I get my tea, I go to my mat, and I'm gonna just lay on my belly on the floor for half an hour. And I'll be fully present with myself for that amount of time. That is my practice. Which leads us to what you do during your practice, right? Movement. So we're going to move on to the next domain of practice. What are your expectations or your needs or your judgments and beliefs about how you should move to do yoga? Right? Are you happy with how you're moving? Are there different ways you might want to move? Do you have expectations about right way, wrong way for it to count? So there is so much guidance and instruction on asana in the world that I'm not even going to touch it. Thousands of hours of yoga instruction on YouTube for free, modifications, books for every style, gentle yoga, ashtanga yoga, all the different kinds of movement options available, like so much. So I'm not going to go there. My answer to you is how to move in ways that feel good. Move in ways that feel good. Like, what does my body need right now? Okay, and then I'm going to respond to that with care and concern and interest and curiosity. How does your heart need attention? How does your mind need attention? And so start with where you are. Start with exactly how you feel in this moment, where you feel tension. Pay attention to your sensations. Take slow, full breaths. Let your movement respond to and ride on your breathing. Get curious about how you feel and trust that that's enough. It truly is enough. And it matters. And if you enter that relationship with that kind of curiosity and care, it just blooms, right? You can start to find what's real and present for you in your body at any given moment. Some suggestions for options if you're coming up blank, like, I don't even know what feels good. Like, what does that even mean? Self-massage. So there are these little pink, they're called pinky balls, pink massage balls. They're like $3 on the internet, and they're beautiful for self-massage. So you take a ball, you could put it in a sock at the end of the sock, hold it over your shoulder, and then lean against a wall and massage the deep muscles of your back. You can put it under your glutes and lay on the floor and roll around. So it's self-massage in that way, or self-massage is touching your own face, right? The tension in your jaw or your neck or your shoulders, just affectionate touch for your own skin. Like Matthew Sanford's journey through yoga was to realize that even though he couldn't feel his legs, they were still alive. Like, I can feel my legs. And so I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to rub my palms on my own calves and the skin of my feet and the skin of my belly and my chest, and appreciate this aliveness that I feel. You might hum, you might drum, you might sing, you might rock in rhythm with your breath. Some of the most profoundly transcendent meditative experiences I've ever had in my life have been with deep breathing and rhythmic rocking. Roll around on the floor like a kid. Put your legs up in the air and just like stretch in ways that feel spontaneous and fun for you. Shake your body, really vigorously shake. And the most important pose of all, Shavasana. Like, don't forget to do Shavasana. If Shavasana is all you do, if you go to your mat and you lay in Shavasana, beautiful job, right? That's all we really need. And Shavasana is so profound because it is corpse pose. It is a pose where we are reminded of the brevity of this life, this impermanence that we are. So if you go to your mat and you take Shavasana and you savor the gift of your own life very consciously for 2 minutes, that can open up everything for you for the rest of the day. Like, how might you relate to your boss or your children or your neighbor or your own narrative of self-criticism if you've had this tangible, visceral reminder that this life is impermanent? I am not guaranteed tomorrow. So the practice of Shavasana is one that really wakes us up to being engaged in life. Let's talk about compromises. So this is sort of the last section of practice, the ways that we have to compromise. And we have to compromise because the dog's going to lay on the mat and my kids are going to jump on my back, and there's just noise, there's interruptions, it's part of life. And so some of the ways we compromise is by allowing that that's going to be a thing, that's going to happen. And can you notice the sensations and the reactions that you have? How reactive are you feeling when your kids come in and jump on you? So if I have not had enough time to myself, I'm going to be kind of pissed when somebody jumps on me again. But if I've had enough space for my practice over time, when somebody jumps on me, I'm like, oh, good, let's play, right? Like Leela, we're going to play for my yoga practice today. So notice your own reactivity and use that as data to inform what you need and where you have a deficiency and where you might need to fill your bucket a little bit more. And the other piece, this mother load, martyr mothers, like, where can you develop strong boundaries around your time and your space and stand firmly for what you need? Like, I would not go without food and water or sleep because I fundamentally as a human animal need that. And I know now as a woman, I fundamentally as a human animal need some solitude. So I require that and I make that happen for myself. So your relationship with yourself is a relationship like any other. So maybe we have a busy life and I only see my husband for a few minutes, but like daily, pretty much daily, we connect. And I say, hey, how are you? Like, good to see you. How was your day? What's going on for you? You're good? Okay, you're good. Yeah, I'm good too. Cool. Love you. Bye. But then once a week, hopefully we get a couple of hours to connect and really attend to each other and be present with each other and go a few layers deeper. Like, how are you really? Like, how are you changing? What's real for you? Are you well? Like, I care for you, and just being in connection with one another. And hopefully once a year, a couple times a year, you get a couple nights away. So you can have 48 hours to drop in deeply into shared presence and quiet with one another. You need that for yourself too. So my daily practice might be really short, but every week I'm going to make sure I get a 2-hour chunk to do something that's much longer, much deeper, much more nourishing and rich for me. And then at least once a year, hopefully twice a year, I take a whole night away and I do a full retreat for myself where I can be in silence and I can be in ritual and in practice every moment of the day for myself. So your relationship with yourself matters just as much as any other relationship in your life, if not more, because everybody else could go away, but you're stuck with yourself, right? Yeah. Let's come back to habit. So this area of the last part of, we're coming to the end of the workshop. Now that we've gone over all these domains of practice and we understand the cue, routine, reward cycle of habit formation and the idea of friction, we're going to give you a little bit of time to think about, and I'll continue naming some of the suggestions, reviewing some of the suggestions about your habit, the wholeness of your habit. And you might return to this in a few days in your journal or share it on the Facebook group, what you've come up with. But identify for yourself your cue, which could be the time of day, the way you feel in your body, and notice what's working about your cue. What do you like about your cue? What is effective about your cue? And what could you change to make your cue more reliable or more obvious? So a few other suggestions for cues. Keep your mat in an obvious place. Like Holly's was just right next to the bed. She had to step on it to get in and out of bed. So it's really obvious. I keep mine out in the living room on the floor or rolled in the corner or right under the couch. I keep my earplugs and my cushion all in one space, so I don't have to go looking for anything. Put it on your calendar. Set an alarm. Call your accountability buddy or text your accountability buddy. Make the cue obvious. Put sticky notes. If sticky notes are a little tacky, you could write it in a beautiful handwriting, like write some beautiful little message for yourself and tape it to your fridge, your steering wheel of your car, the back of your phone, the ceiling above your bed. So the first thing you do when you open your eyes is you see this little sticky note that reminds you, like, I am taking care of myself today. Or breath and sensation, like a reminder to come into your body in some way. You could tie a string around your wrist. You could keep a stone in your pocket, little tangible reminders to remember to practice. You could put whatever yama or niyama you're contemplating. So maybe you're working on a gratitude practice and you're practicing santosha or contentment. And so you remind yourself of that gratitude practice visibly throughout your home in ways that it will remind you to reflect throughout the day on that part of your practice. And there's a beautiful Zen phrase that I love that says, the most important thing is to remember the most important thing. And I keep that with me a lot as I move through my day. So whatever my cue is, it's reminding me to remember what I want and what really matters, and to show up fully in an integrated wholeness in my life. Again, so the next couple of days, think about what you want your routine to be. So you have in mind some cues that could work that you'll experiment with. And what do you want your routine to be? You can make it idealized. It might help to make it really grounded in realism. Like if I set expectations really low for what my basic daily routine needs to be, anytime that I go above and beyond that, fabulous. I'm a queen, right? I got to practice for an hour. But if I just have my minimum need for self-care to be 10 minutes, then it's much more achievable. There's another concept called habit stacking that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is, if you're already doing something that's habitual, how can you add a new habit to it? So you don't have to, it's like, if I'm walking on foot and I pass the flower stand, I'm totally gonna buy some flowers. But if I'm driving to the other side of town and I want some flowers, I'm not going to go out of my way to go get the flowers from that flower stand. So habit stacking is the same way. How can you stack your habit along with something that you're already doing to increase the likelihood that it's going to be something you do on a daily basis? And how can you make it as frictionless as possible? So identify where your friction areas are and see what you can do to shift some of the friction away from your routine and create friction to kind of make some of those obstacles less of an obstacle. So if there's something that's keeping you from your practice, how can you plan in advance using that like prefrontal cortex to plan in advance so that in the moment you don't have to think about it because you've planned ahead to create a more frictionless environment for yourself. The rewards of practice, that last piece, the cue routine reward cycle, the rewards need to be immediate and tangible. So a bigger long-term reward, like, oh, if I do yoga every day, I'll have like better cardiovascular health, or I'll have my, other kinds of like health markers, right? Those don't really motivate us. It needs to be an immediate sensory reward. And so you might identify for yourself rewards if it's hard, if you're just starting out on a practice and you need like a very strong visual concrete reward for your practice, you can make a chart. It can be super satisfying to see a little grid on graph paper and just fill in a box. And every day that there's a little black box stacking up, like there's something super satisfying about that. That's why we do that with our kids, because it feels really motivating, where you don't want to skip one. Once you see that stretch of black boxes spreading, you kind of want to keep going and not break the chain. For me, that feels a little stressful. I don't use charts for my kids because I'm not very good at them, because some days you don't do the thing, right? And then that empty box is glaring at me and I feel bad about myself. So another thing you can do is keep a jar, an empty jar in your practice space. And every day that you do your practice, your 5-minute practice, put a bead or a stone into the jar. And over time, you'll see the jar fill and you'll reflect like, oh, look at this lovely jar that represents all the days, all the times that I had my date with myself, that I nourished my relationship with my own being. So those are really good visual, tactile, action-based ways of strategizing for a reward after your practice. Texting your accountability buddy is also a really concrete reward after practice. But there are sensory rewards too, like my body feels better after I practice. Even doing breath work for 5 minutes or a short loving kindness meditation, very, very short. I feel better. I literally am creating the hormones that I need to feel brighter, to feel more inclined towards loving connection, towards relaxation. So the sensory rewards are pretty substantial and not to be underestimated. And so as you continue with your practice, the sensory reward will be that reminder of like, I love my practice. I feel great when I practice. So it'll be something you look forward to. The emotional reward is kind of like what Holly came to in her sense of feeling pride in her identity as a yogi who practices twice a day, because she was able to say, I'm in alignment with my integrity. Like it matters to me and I'm in alignment with my values. Other kinds of emotional rewards could be an affirmation, like an affirming phrase that you say to yourself, like, I'm proud of myself for keeping my commitment to my own self, or I'm taking care of my future self, or by taking care of me, I'm taking care of all beings. I extend the benefits of my practice to all beings. Because when I practice for 10 minutes, this curiosity about what is my true identity? Like, so say I practice Isvara Pranidhana, where is the turning your attention into contemplation of the nature of reality. And if in that contemplation in my yoga mat, I remember that I am divine presence, that I am Leela at play, that I am a soft breathing animal, I'm a lot more likely in my day and in my heart and my mind to remember, so are you. Like, you're also a breathing, tender animal and divine manifestation at work in the world. And so is all of the human family. And so are the non-animal beings. Like I can connect with plants and see their life essence at work in a slower pace with a different language than mine, but they're just as alive. So I'm more likely to feel connected to the living body of the planet Earth when I practice. So the benefit for me emotionally in my practice over time is that I'm inclining my heart toward brotherhood and sisterhood and a sense of belonging to the universe that's incredibly humbling, where the benefit and the reward isn't just for me, but like I'm benefiting everyone. The more I can remember that that's really the essence of who I am, the more I remember that's the essence of who you are, and the more we all benefit in the world. So your practice, even 5 minutes, matters because of your nervous system, but also because of what it can offer the human family and our planet at this time. I think it's really important to remember that. And that I'm more likely to see playing with my kids, making love to my spouse, walking barefoot on the earth. I'm more likely to experience those as the embodiment of prayer and communion if I've had my little 5-minute practice every day. Like, it's possible I could have that really transcendent experience with my family or in the forest anyway, but I'm priming the pump. So by setting the foundation, I'm inclining my heart and my imagination to see the world through that lens by showing up for my practice on a daily basis. So the reward compounds. Like, by doing my little practice, I'm more likely to experience connection and wonder and awe all the time in the rest of the world. Yeah. Okay, that's the end. The end. I will be sending out an email with a lot of the links to the book recommendations that I mentioned here. A friend of mine has started a wonderful group practice on Zoom. So I'm going to send a link to that as well. If you know that community practice really helps with your motivation, there's some great offerings that are local, and podcasts that I mentioned, I'll send along those links as well. The link to my Facebook page. So if you guys want to, the Facebook groups, if you want to connect or share whatever thoughts that came to you during the workshop, that would be awesome as well. And I am a life coach for women, and I base my work on mindful embodiment and self-compassion. So a lot of the themes that came through this workshop are how I relate to my clients and their work. And I'm doing a bonus promotion during the month of March for my coaching work because I'm growing my business. So I have a really good deal happening for new clients coming on in March. If you're curious, ask me more questions. And I'm going to stay on. It's been a whole hour, a little over an hour and 15 minutes. So thank you for your patience. I'm going to stay on and unmute. So if people have questions and you want to be more in conversation, I have no time constraints at all. So linger. And if you're ready to go eat lunch and go enjoy the sunshine, get on out into the day and have a beautiful afternoon. I want to thank you all for your time. It was really great to see your faces. Mwah. Love it. Thank you. Let's see. Okay. So I think, yeah, you can unmute yourself if you wish.
Hi.
Oh, okay. Hi. Hi.
Afton.
Thanks. Cool. So I don't have any structure around question and answer, but I wanted to open the floor for you if you have something that stood out to you or that you wanted clarification on, and give space for you guys to communicate about. Oh, my neighbor's doing the leaf blower. Hold on just a second. I'm gonna close the window.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, thank you. He keeps a very tidy lawn, and I appreciate it, but it's kind of noisy. Good.
Afton. Hi, Afton.
Hi.
I just wanted to say hello from Vancouver.
Great.
Yeah. I just wanted to say hello to my American friends and send you all love and blessings. And thank you so much, Afton. I am going to jet. That's why I wanted to jump in and just say thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, please be blessed. And I really look forward to you giving more workshops. Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. Love Vancouver. Yay. Thank you for joining us.
A little, yes. Yeah. Hey guys, take care.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Please do, Jackie.
So right now I've been, since January 1st, I've been doing like a yoga video every day, and that's like kind of my, I don't know if that's my cue, like that I don't have to make any decisions, but I'm finding like they don't always line up with what I feel like I want to do. And so I'm struggling with like doing this video versus like, and like finding a different video is like a barrier, right? It's like, now I have to sit here and find a different video. So I don't know, I guess I'm not even sure what I'm asking, but that's something I'm struggling with, is like just sitting down on my mat and listening to my intuition and moving in a way that I want. because I often like still feel like I run out of ideas or like what I should do next versus following along in the video. And I feel like if I'm just going to sit down on my mat, I'm less likely to do it. So I feel like I'm maybe graduating from following along, but I'm not quite ready to just do it on my own.
Right. Okay. I have a couple of thoughts about that. And one could be using this like awareness of the prefrontal cortex and the habitual easy track, right? If there's a day when you do, so you're aware of this in advance, but you don't want to leave the finding the video until you're doing your practice. So could you set aside some time for yourself to find 4 videos that you like, that you could have on standby? So when you go to your practice, you still have the cue of the video, you still don't have to think about it, but you have a couple of options. So one is more vigorous, one is more nurturing, one is more meditative and self-compassion oriented, one is more like playful, core, plank kind of stuff. So you have the options to respond to more of what your body's feeling, but you still don't have to be responsible for creating the choreography from scratch in the moment. And that could be a bridge to finding enough trust and enough awareness of what options are, what moves are available to you, that then you can start to cobble them together for yourself. So instead of just the one video, if you are working from 4 videos or 5 videos, like, oh, I like this part of that one, but I'm kind of done. I'm just going to remember what that section of the other one was. And then you can start to blend the moves together in your own coordinated way. Does that sound like it would make sense or be useful to you at all? Or what ideas do you have in response to that?
Yeah. Having the like different categories. Because it's like the first day of my period, it's like, let's do this you know, like core workout, and I'm like,
yeah, no, yeah,
I just want to like stretch. So
right, yeah. So and give yourself, so that it's like, because it is overwhelming, like the ocean of YouTube videos about yoga. Like that's the last thing I want to do, is start browsing through all of those when I have time to actually practice. So it's that place of planning in advance for yourself. Maybe at the beginning of the month, pick out 4.
Right.
So there's not a lot of choices, but it's enough variability that you give yourself some options. And then when you come to the mat, you're not stuck with just one that doesn't suit you. You have like a few backup plans that you could switch to.
Yeah.
That's one thought that I had. Yeah, you're welcome. I'm so glad to see you. Thanks for joining me. Anybody else have questions or thoughts about what their challenges have been or things that you're inspired to try? Thanks, Vern. Good to see you.
I just want to say that I'm really grateful to be here today and hear what you had to share, because it really resonates with where I'm at. Just that before becoming a mother, my practice was pretty casual as is. I would just kind of squeeze it in, roll out the yoga mat, and then I would go to a studio and have more of a formal practice. But I just feel like since I've become this mother, that even doing that kind of casual, real quick, just what feels good, like I have this envision that, because I want it to be focused and I want it to be quiet and I want to connect with me and disconnect from the demands. And so when the demands still come at me when I'm trying to get that, you know, it's just like, and then I just avoid it. Like when I think about doing it, I'm like, oh, that just sounds like, I know it's nap time and she's going to wake up the second I roll out my mat. Like, and so I just don't even avoid it, to avoid the disappointment of it coming crashing down. And so rethinking about it, of how can I make it work, and how can my expectations, you know, how can I nourish myself within the existence I live. I think that that's going to be really beneficial to kind of look to see when I have moments of restlessness that I could be filling more so than just by picking up my phone or and just in general, my self-care recently with the start of this new year, just that it needs to be me. If it's going to happen, it's going to be me, and nobody's going to just gift me all the time I need in the world and the motivation to do it. That, you know, I need to make it happen. So I've already started making little changes, like by setting my alarm in the morning to get up early. And it's like, oh, before I get my cup of coffee, maybe I could just take a couple minutes to meditate, and, you know, I just sitting here, I've kind of seen, oh, it's not impossible. There are ways with adjustments to find a practice that is actually something sustainable. Thank you.
Yay, good. Ashley, I'm so glad to hear that. I just like echo exactly everything that you said, including that sense of like, well, why isn't anybody noticing that I'm exhausted and I need time for myself? You know, like, oh, I have to give that to me because nobody else is going to give that to me. And how much more empowered I felt after moving past that boundary to be like, oh yeah, I'm responsible for myself and I can just get up earlier or whatever the circuit. It sounds like you're finding lots of little ways and to imagine new gaps and new possibilities for yourself. Yeah. How old is your little one?
She's 3.5.
Yeah, nice. So busy.
Yep. And her dad's working from home, which is really great in some ways, but you know, the bedroom is now the office, and you know, I think that's that further complication that figuring out the groove of it all. But
right. Yeah, it's a lot. Well, thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ashley and I used to do Zooms on Sunday mornings together when we were on a book club together, and so I was happy to see her face here. Maybe we could be accountability for self-care in moments together. Kind of resurrect the Sunday morning.
Nice.
I just want to say thank you so much. I came to one of your classes at Oddfellows, like right before the big pause.
Oh,
so it was literally like a year ago, and I was
the
like,
big pause.
And you read
nice, good.
Poem, and I was like, I can't wait to go to more classes with her, and then the world shut down. So you know, time happens.
Yes.
One of the things that you said today that really resonated, that helped me, like so many things actually, but this kind of like, why do you practice? Like, why do you want to build a practice, and what's the picture you have of the practice? Mm-hmm. And so I love like habit science, and like when I set the tea kettle on in the morning, like I do a sun salutation just to stretch my body, but I don't consider that to be a home practice. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And when you were like, why do you want to practice? I have this, just to be honest, like I am working through a lifelong disruption of connecting exercise and body work with diet culture, and that it's not like self-punishment, but that the goal and the reward is something almost external validation rather than how do I feel. And how it struck me today that even though the reason why I do yoga is connected to all these other things, I could see them up on the board that I'm looking at right here, and it made me smile. I still have this mental picture of what my practice is supposed to look like, which is connected to that diet culture, exercise, like you got to sweat for an hour in order for it to be a real practice. And the yogis that I know and look up to do that, even though like Zima, you know what I mean? And they have a body to reflect that practice. So it really struck me. I was like, hey, I already have a home practice with my tea kettle thing. So
yes, you do.
yes, you do. Taking credit for, and just recognizing where my mindset, even in like dark, shadowy ways, like creeps in when I have the best intentions to like do this with self-compassion and further for not the right reasons, but a different set of reasons. But I have like an image for how that's supposed to look, which is part of a different path. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That totally makes sense. That's so funny because I had to cut out so much because I could just talk and talk and talk, but I knew I was already going to be kind of a long workshop. And I had a section where I was like, so what you could do is put on your tea kettle and then in your kitchen, do like 3 sun salutations and that counts. So that's already what you're doing. It's perfect. Yeah.
And it's just because that's what my body needs in the morning. It was just like, listening. It wasn't like I read a book or had a guru say do
Yeah.
that, I was like, oh, my body feels like that's what it needs to do now. But,
My body wants that.
but I wasn't thinking that was practice.
Right. And I love what you said. I absolutely echo that and honor that. And it's part of what I feel drawn to teaching. It's why I still really feel like I love to teach, is to remind people that this monetization and consumption of yoga as part of the beauty and wellness empire is not the point. And so yoga as a form of self-flagellation to get a yoga body in time for bikini season is harmful and misses the point. And so I'm like really in honor of you and your path in recognizing the ways that those narratives are, they're the sea we're swimming in. Like that's the water we swim in, it's everywhere. And so to recognize it and to be tender and kind to yourself when you notice like, oh, there it was again. Like, I know that that's not what I want to think, but it still can sneak in subtle ways sometimes. And so to recognize with sweetness, you're like, oh no, I don't need to choose that. Like I am taking care of myself in other ways is really commendable, because that's all we can do is just notice when that pops up again and then say, thank you, no thank you. I'm gonna choose this way. Yeah. Appreciate that, Sarah. Thank you.
I just want to say, Jackie, I resonated with your video thing because I was doing yoga with Adrienne, which I love. I mean, I love her, but I mean, she's cute and kind of makes fun of herself, but there were days where I'm like, I just don't know if I'm going to rock with what she's going to offer.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes that would be just enough friction to give myself a pass. Right? So I love the idea of like eliminating the paradox of choice, like the paralysis of having so many options. So just like choose 4 that you know will align with what the energy is. That was really helpful.
Right. Yeah. And depending on how you want to make that happen, you could be like, when I'm ovulating, I know that I'm really energetic. Or when I'm premenstrual, I'm like angry and I need to be able to process my emotions of anxiety and restlessness and irritation. And when I'm on my cycle, like I need to rest. I just want to sit and bleed and breathe and take care of myself, you know? And so to go into it, recognizing as women, the energetic cycles and emotional cycles that we experience in our bodies, and like give yourself some options that you know will line up with the different energetics of your month or seasons of the year, right? Like spring has its own qualities and your life needs. Like sometimes things are really easy and you have a lot of space with your family life, and other times like things are hard and you need to have options that are going to be more grounding and more oriented towards like self-care and rest and restoration. So keeping that in mind. Great. Any other like questions or thoughts before we head on out into the sunshine?
She's crying now. I was just gonna say, amazing workshop. I loved it so much.
I love you.
I just really enjoyed it. We had a couple snacks and a lot of crying, but it was great.
Yeah.
I was also gonna say, I like the huge thumbs up, Sarah, on your sun salutation piece. And then because there was the same thing with sort of my twice a day yoga practice.
Yeah.
And a lot of that piece too, that I'm like, oh, if I at least do this, my body feels better. Like my body really feels better. And then Afton, I thought that was a great suggestion around the videos and like having people, are you smiling? Having people do like have a few videos. And the other thing that I've done is because over time, especially if you have like in-person instructors that you like, to do that same thing, to just sort of think back to like, oh, what sort of moves did I like from these different people's class? And so like, even when I'm at home, like maybe I'll use a video, or maybe I'll use some of my Afton moves. Or I had another couple instructors in Portland and they had their own like special moves. And so I can have like the all-stars where I take my favorite Afton moves, and then I take like my favorite moves from my other couple instructors I'd go to in Portland. And then you get to like mix and match. And then if you ever get stuck, you can go ahead and just like pop on the video or whatever. So anyway, I was just going to throw that out there to the group as well.
Yeah. Hi, baby.
I'm here. I'm here, live. Okay, I'm gonna mute, but thanks again for everything. It was awesome.
Very good. Thank you for joining me. Thanks for letting me use you as my example all throughout the, the workshop. Nice. Great. All right. Well, if there are no more questions, I want to just thank you for your time and your contribution and your participation. And I just appreciate all of you so much and wish you the best. And if you want to keep in touch, you can find me on Facebook and Instagram and email me and stuff. And let's keep our community support thriving, even though we're still a little isolated from each other. So we're not alone. We might be apart, but we're not alone.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye, Ashley. Bye, Megan.